All
All
right,
right,
looks like we're live.
right on, man. Welcome back. Um, Second episode of the revamp, 26 total, I think.
Hmm.
Um, we kind of now I think are at the point where it's not a regular deal. We do it when we can, and it goes live when we can. No more of this Monday night or every night. This is gonna be when it is. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So y'all know how it is if you've been around. If not, we strike up a conversation and see where it goes. And it's kind of trying to add a continuation to the historical underground meetings that we have on Fridays at 11 that not as
Hmm.
many people are able to come to. So hopefully you can get a little bit of underground education over here. So yeah, man, we'll start it off. What's going on with you?
Nothing much. So today is
Election day.
and election day, and I know we were probably thinking about having another conversation about a continuation of what we do at our underground meetings, but considering the occasion,
Sure.
it made sense. And we could also talk about, look, what is the meaning of this election to a multitude of people? Because for some people, they could say, hey, this means nothing to me. At the end of the day, tomorrow's Wednesday. I got to go to work. You got to
Right.
go to work. How does picking this person or that person really going to affect me per se? So some people might take it that way. Other people are thinking it's the end of the world. I
Right.
saw this thing that said, oh no, I don't know what to wear. This is my first Civil War. Uh,
uh,
so some people are on edge. Like a lot of people are anxious. I saw a lot of people online that looked or appeared anxious, and so it sounds like the election means something to a lot of different people. Um,
you
so I
know
mean,
what's
we could go there.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. What's funny is I hear, like, according to most accounts, we're pretty much fucked either way,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because I heard Elon the other day say if the Democrats win, that's the last election ever. It's over with. Democracy's done as we know it. And I can't describe or list how many people I've heard say the same thing, that if Trump wins, it's the end of democracy. So which one is it?
Mhm. Right. Yeah, it just sounds like you're definitely. I mean, look, the voices you're going to hear the loudest are the alarmist. So on either side, you have people sounding their alarm. This is the most consequential election of all time. And granted, you're old and I'm old, and we've been hearing that like every election. They say this is the most important election of our lives. And granted, in the past 16 years or so, things have been interesting. Um, you know, in 2008, we had a momentous election. Uh, America finally got its act together and felt that it was, I guess, okay finally to elect our first black president. But America was then also experiencing a lot of economic turmoil. We were in the midst of that recession, the Great Recession, right around the time he was elected, and there were two wars still going on at the same time that were controversial and at times not popular at all, and that they carried on. So I guess maybe America might have been in that recession and war fog that elections were kind of always on the back burner. Yeah, it's Barack. Well, he's our president. And then yeah, he gets reelected. He's our president. And then after that, things get a bit wonky, where people start to anticipate that this person's going to win or that person's going to lose, and things never really kind of seem the same after that. Even after the 4 years of Trump, then we experience COVID. An event that affected the world, and how America responded was different from how other countries responded. But it was this unique experience that was affecting, I guess, the the dynamic of politics at the time. If you don't understand history, granted, we could talk about, well, no, we had the Spanish flu, and that was before the election of 19. See, who would have been in 1920, right? That would have been. Um,
Which one?
The election of 1920, like we know when the Spanish flu came out,
Yeah.
um, we have another event that's catastrophic, worldwide ramifications, but elections still continue. And I think in that election, we might have gotten Warren G. Harding at
Yeah.
the start of the 1920s. That didn't last long, but
It's interesting. I wonder. There has to be a most consequential of all the elections that have occurred, right? I mean,
yeah,
or most
someone's going
important,
to pick it.
right? What would that be? And is there such a thing? Maybe do we like to just pick these things out, and there really is no such thing beyond what we invest into each and every one of them, the meaning that we invest into each and every one of them.
Right.
Maybe, I don't know. Hard to say. But then,
And every meaning will have a different value. So you look at Elon. Elon obviously is looking at this, it seems to me, from maybe like this economic experimental viewpoint. So for him, it's existential because he feels like democracy won't be able to continue under this presidency for whatever reason it may be. You talk to a female, and she's and a lot of concerns are regarding the overturn of Roe v. Wade. That wasn't a factor in the previous election. That could be a factor in this election. Again, you have the potential of a female president on the cusp. That might be the factor. So there are a lot of different values and therefore different meanings to elections. And that gives everybody the right to say, hey, this is the most consequential election of my lifetime. If they see it as such, if they value it as such, depending on what those values are.
isn't there a a problem though, maybe, that we have to be aware of when it comes to thinking that we are in the most important or most consequential or most significant moment in history? Like, are we really in one, or is it more common for humans, and particularly U.S. Americans, to think that they are in the most important moment, in the place that has been intended to be, at the crossroads, the cusp? I mean, I don't know. Like, maybe we're primed to think this way, but then we, at the end of the day, like you said, I mean, we wake up and you still got to go to work in the morning. You got to do all these other types of things. How much
Mm-hmm.
really changes?
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's not true for everybody. I'll admit, when Donald Trump was first elected, my wife was devastated. My daughter was devastated. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't devastated, but they were devastated. Uh, you know what I mean? Like their lives were over in a way,
Mm-hmm.
and now they feel sort of even more like that's going to be the case if he wins.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if it's more really just how badly you want one side to win, and how angry maybe you are that the other side, if the other side does win. I don't know. It's hard to say, man. It's hard to say because I've always been someone who wants to kind of like question my bias. I want to check and reflect what it is that's making me think the way that I think, right? So I'm constantly analyzing, over-analyzing, reanalyzing my own thoughts. Where are they coming from? What's causing them? So sometimes you can second guess and miss a real, genuine, significant, most important moment pass you by because of that maybe tendency. Um, I don't know, but I certainly can say that out of anything I've ever experienced, this seems to be the most, at least most people think that it's the most consequential.
Yeah, I remember that moment um, uniquely in my office. I had some students come into my office. I remember one particular student come into my office when Trump was elected, and she broke down crying.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if any guys ever did that. So that gave me the impression that this was a moment for many women, and they valued it differently than I was valuing it. They were affected by it more so than I was affected by it, at least in that moment. Um, as to how it's affecting people today, or whatever takes place tonight, I just know. I mean, you just kind of have a feeling that uh, we've kind of seen this before. So the feeling of anxiety and then disappointment or anger or whatever it is, because we saw it in 2016. Um, Now I wonder, and I haven't talked to many, but I wonder if when Trump lost the election, there's obviously disappointment and anger, and we wouldn't have a January 6th
Right.
had that
Uh,
not been the case.
right. Yeah, there's a lot of
So
people.
it sounds like both sides are clinging to this notion that this is the one that's going to save us.
Right.
And then we have to ask ourselves, well, why do we need a savior? What exactly can the president do? And why does the electorate, or not the electorate, why do individuals feel that this one office has the power to change, levels of my life? Obviously, I mean, some people would make the argument with the overturn of Roe v. Wade. Trump was able to put 3 judges on the Supreme Court. Now, if he gets elected tonight, the rumor is that we got 2 more judges that are going to be leaving soon. Maybe one under impeachment, Thomas, and then another judge, Alito. He might step off. And if that be the case, then Trump has the ability to then and he'll be the first sitting president to have handpicked 5 judges on a 9-judge bench. The only sitting president, to my knowledge,
Yeah.
to have handpicked a majority of the judges on the Supreme Court. Now, he doesn't pack it; he's doing it legally, but
Yeah.
I just don't. We've never seen this before. We've never had a president in a long time that has won an election, lost an election, and then re-won an election. I think Grover Cleveland might be the only one. Where the Grover Cleveland historians at? Nowhere. Yeah. But this one will be different.
Yeah.
So again, that could lend itself to a unique and momentous event. We haven't seen this a lot.
Different time period, right? Cleveland was in the late 19th century, and it was the robber baron, kind of like captain of industry, titan, mogul, empire building, early stages for the United States on the world scale, and the presidents were very much guided and controlled by these powerful elites. And in this system, man, it's like Trump won and no one thought he was going to win.
Right.
Then he got beat, and a lot of people didn't think he was still going to be alive because of how fat and sloppy he lives his life and how old he is. But he is. And some people thought he was going to be in prison, but he's not. Right. He's about to become president again, having never admitted to have lost. But there's, there are all these different things going on here in this system. Have we ever had anybody like Trump as a president dominate the discourse so much? And it makes me wonder why it is that we don't have some sort of examination or test that one must pass in order to run for vice president.
Or vice president or president?
Right, president, or whatever, president.
Right. Yeah, they don't need anything.
Like, I need a medical degree if I'm going to be working on your body. Right. I need a legal degree if I'm going to be defending you in court. I need a bachelor's degree with a teaching certificate if I'm going to teach. I can rule the free world, so to speak, and have no requirements whatsoever. Why is that the case? I don't understand really why we think that's okay. Because, I feel like, and this is not an endorsement for Harris, because I don't trust anything that comes out of Democrat Party members' mouths anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's tough.
I'm done with them. I'm not trusting anything. Anyone calls himself a Democrat, I don't listen to what you say. And that goes for Republicans too. It goes for Republicans as well. So but Trump's a different kind of person. Trump is more dangerous, I feel, because he doesn't know how the political system works. He doesn't know very much history. He doesn't know very foreign policy at all. He I'm all for shaking up the thing, shaking up the game, mixing it up, going against the grain. But like, if you're, a fish and you've just been thrown in a pot of oil and you expect it to survive, I mean, it's like, come on, like you got to have some basic, genuine knowledge and understanding about the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that he has that based off of his decision making in office, the things that he says and supports. First off, I mean, right off of Russia, he knows nothing about Russia and U.S. historical, geopolitical, Cold War history. Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I will go so far as to think that Vladimir Putin has something on on Trump that's compelling him to act, that's making him worried. And I'm not a very conspiratorial type of person. And it took some of my Russian historian professors to convince me of that. Because of the way he acts, like no other president has ever acted before when it comes to relationships with Russia. That's just one example, right? Now, does that mean that like I said, I support the Harris administration? No, but do I think the United States may survive longer with the Harris administration? Probably.
Mm-hmm.
I think another Trump administration may hasten the demise. Perhaps. I don't know that I will go so alarmist and say that it will, but I can see how. What is that quote? I can't remember what that quote from Benjamin Franklin that people oftentimes cite about. He's talking to somebody where they like, you created this democracy if you can keep it, or something to the effect of like how a democracy, the longer it lasts, the more difficult it is to maintain.
For sure. Yeah, at least the integrity of it.
Yeah, because the more people who get to speak up and have a voice and are perhaps uneducated and unaware, the more polarization develops,
mm-hmm.
the more a particular person like this, who I don't think this actually. I had a conversation with Joel today. I called him earlier this morning, and we had a conversation about it where he says he thinks that the founders tried to protect from somebody like this when the senators were appointed by Congress, where the Electoral College had even more strength than it does now, where you had to own land to vote. You had to kind of know what you were doing, right?
Right.
Because there is this idea of someone coming and swaying the masses in a way that I think Trump has been able to do more so than any other presidential candidate in U.S. history.
Well, so his favorite president is Andrew Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
Coincidentally, it's right around that time when Andrew Jackson is elected that we remove the requirement to own land in order to vote.
Right.
So
True.
that enlarges the Democratic pool.
Right.
More and more people during this age are, and by the way, when Jackson is elected, he's the first one from the West. So that was a novel thing at the time. Most of the presidents before him were all coming from Virginia. Right. The sole exception of Adams, who came from Massachusetts, I think.
Well, they were all 76ers before him, right? They were all generation signed that document, who were at the forefront. He was the first one.
And again, still from Virginia. Adams coming from Massachusetts. So now you have this guy from the West. He's the only one. He's the second one to not have a college degree. He had some time in politics, but he gets his fame from being a general during the War of 1812.
Before him,
Washington.
Oh yeah, no.
So they're two generals.
Yeah,
and he's supposedly this champion of small government unless he wants to flex.
Right.
We see that with the Trail of Tears, and the tariff of 1828, but or that nullification crisis. And
Certainly.
so Trump presents himself in a similar vein, like he's a man of the people, and Trump and Jacksonian democracy, as I was taught, was the ushering of the common man. Well, here you go with you have maybe too many people having a say in the election has propped up this man to be president. And if that's what the people voted, then that's what the people voted. Now, granted, he loses the electoral. I'm sorry, he doesn't win the popular vote when he won his presidency. He only got the electoral vote.
Right, which makes it seem, yeah, that's a great point, because it's not.
And that adds more controversy to your presidential legacy if you can't secure the popular vote. Then when he runs again against Biden, he not only loses the electoral vote, he loses the popular vote in dramatic fashion. Like we're talking about, major numbers.
Yeah.
And that led many people to believe that the elections were rigged, it was stolen, that the ballots were stuffed. And he'll be saying this even tonight, even before it comes out, even before anybody projects anything. He's gonna be like, they're already cheating. They're already cheating. I'm almost positive, because that's the typical rhetoric. But one thing that I thought was interesting is that even when he was president, as we were getting to this notion, well, it's the end of the world. Is it?
Yeah.
Like, he was president for 4 years, and make an argument that, well, we were almost there. Yeah, but almost ain't it. You know what I'm saying? I could almost win the lottery. I didn't win the lottery. Our system of government, checks and balances, the accountability placed in our system doesn't allow for a single position or entity or individual to amass that type of wealth, which is, I think we were talking about alarmist, especially last weekend, when we were talking about, well, don't fascist this, fascist that. What exactly is taking place that is fascist? Our system doesn't allow for it.
Yeah.
But we are scared that anything's possible, that the position may have more power than people have an understanding of. And it scares people to go out and vote. I think a lot of people are going to be voting. I don't know if it's going to reach 2020 numbers, but
I haven't looked at anything. I've deliberately had no news feed on me at all today. I can go. There's an element here that I think is important. I don't want to call it media. I think it's more like how we as a people digest information these days. Because it's not just the media networks that dominate that people are always concerned with. It's also these crackpot websites that people go to beyond that stuff. We have a tendency, I think, to overstate, over pick, over assume something about reality. So, like, for example, if you ask the average American how many Black people are killed by police every year, give you a number that's shockingly higher than is actually real.
Right.
Right.
I believe that.
I think there's something similar here with this abortion issue, right? Like, how many women actually have an abortion every year, and how many of those women does something go wrong? Now, am I trying to undermine the severity of that? Absolutely not. It's horrible. It's sad if a woman can't get medical care and she dies. That's messed up for sure. But we're still talking about, like, in the 90s and high 90% of women who probably won't be affected by Roe v. Wade.
Right.
Now, it's very likely they'll have a friend, they'll have somebody in their network that does, of course. So I'm not trying to say this is okay, but look how we think of it, like all women are now destroyed, or like we're all losing something. It goes from, like, we're thinking about the 100% when really we're dealing with these kind of small things. And we see the same thing with immigration, right? All these immigrants are coming over here, killing all these people. And you'd be shocked to see that the people who say that will give you numbers that are far more than are actually real. Like, we have this tendency when we see information and we want to fit it into our worldview. We like intensify the reality of the information and make it seem like it's 100%. I was shocked about this with drugs. Like, we think when you stick a needle in your arm, you're addicted. You shoot heroin, it's over with. When in fact, 76% of people who ever do never become addicts. That shocked me when I first heard that, because of the culture that I grew up in that told me what happens to you when you start shooting heroin, right? It made me think everybody's going to turn into some addict slave of the drug. Like we have this way of sensationalizing things, saying them in very scary ways, and blowing up the proportions, and we act on those proportions.
Yeah, unfortunately, and so I don't know what it's called specifically, but it's some type of bias where it's like it's not a regency bias. It's some type of like information bias, so that when you receive certain information that confirms your initial position, you'll accept that and then you'll validate it, justify it, you'll in even worse, expand upon it when you find the evidence that supports your initial bias. And here's the dangerous part that I think is key to what you were getting at a second ago, is that people act on it. So now they're they were finding the evidence to support their initial position, as opposed to allowing the evidence to change their position. We discussed this in the Historical Underground meeting not too long ago when we were discussing, improper methods of research, where people have a thesis, people have an idea, and then they only go and find the evidence that supports that, which doesn't require you to have to rethink, go back into the lab, rethink your thoughts, re-examine your initial position, because you just got exposed to new evidence. You need to readjust your position. People don't want to do that because it requires too much time, and I got to graduate in 2 years, so why do that? When people have dedicated themselves to even faith, their religion, heaven forbid they be exposed to information that might disrupt that foundation, because now they have to backpedal and start over from scratch to some degree. I think a lot of people do this, and I think it's an information bias. I think it's I don't recall exactly I don't recall the exact name of it, but yeah, definitely people do that, and they do it on both sides. For sure, they do it on both sides, whether it's in like you brought up, whether it's the abortion issue or the immigration issue. People they're really just looking to confirm. Oh, confirmation bias. I apologize. That's what it is. It's confirmation bias. And man, I see it. I see it with people that are liberal and conservative.
Yeah, I mean, it improves. I think it increases. Maybe there may be some direct proportion of, like, I don't know, with the rise since the 1920s, maybe, and the kind of mass consumerism, what we've described in this podcast, some earlier episode, as limbic capitalism, to coin that term. The term was coined by David Koch, book Age of Addiction, in which he describes how figuring out the limbic portion of the brain and how to tap into it increases people's desires for these substances. I think there's an information kind of aspect to that, right? The clicks and the likes and the confirmation that we receive by getting in these little spaces with people who are sharing the same events and making us think that our ideas have been thought about as well and experienced as well. And
I mean, they call that virtual signaling. As of recent, that's the jargon for it. That by doing something, I'm demonstrating how virtuous I am. Look at me. I did this. Look at me. I voted. Look at me. I support this or I support that. When there might not be a sincere of efforts or action to it behind it. It's called virtue signaling.
That's kind of what I wanted to talk about with this Joe Rogan's endorsement of Trump. I haven't watched his podcast, but I've seen some clips. I've seen less clips of the Vance one, just because I can't even stand listening to that guy talk. He just sounds so phony. Vance reminds me more of Democrats. I'm going to speak in a very automated way, the way this is telling me to. And so it bores me to death. And then only saw a few clips of the Elon one. But like the clips that I see and hear of Trump, like I can recognize how full of shit that he is. It's not like it's wrong. How can you not see what's coming out of this guy's mouth? Not making any sense. Gibberish, repeating himself over and over again, not finishing saying this and focusing more on the look of himself, kind of why he's saying it, I think, more so than what he is saying, how he's saying it, his demeanor. And these are the elements that he has similar to fascist leaders. Let's be clear. I mean, he's not going to be able to take over the government and start arresting all Democrats. Right. Come on, as you said here, the system is not, that I know of, capable of doing something like that yet. But so and then here comes Rogan during the Musk interview, endorses Trump. Does he do it because is he a smart guy? Does he really see this, or is he just selling out to the system and the bro culture that follows him and capitalizing on that?
It's weird. I'll say this, if that be he didn't endorse him in 2020.
Right.
He didn't endorse him in 2016.
He seems to have done it right after Elon told him that if the Democrats win, democracy's over.
That's true. But what I'm getting,
smart guy who he venerates telling him this.
Right. What I'm getting at is the previous elections, he would not publicly endorse Trump. In the previous elections, remember, this is the first time Trump has been on the podcast. And Rogan's argument as to why is because he doesn't want to give him any, he doesn't want to support what he has going on. He doesn't want to help him because he knows that by being on his podcast might help.
Yeah.
So he says, I don't want him. I don't need him on my podcast. I haven't asked for him to be on my podcast. Rogan picks who he wants on his podcast.
Right.
It's not like MSNBC where they're telling you, no, you need to interview this guy tonight.
Right. No, he decided, and
he picks who he wants. Right. Now, when he picked, when he had Trump on his podcast, you can make an argument that was an indirect endorsement because he had previously said, I don't want to help him out, so I'm not going to have him on the podcast. Now he has him on the podcast. You can make an argument
he offered Harris as well.
That's true. That is very true, and she declined.
Right.
And here's what I will say. I think because I watched the whole episode regarding with Trump and Vance. I haven't seen the Elon one, but I'll say this. I thought it was interesting that he waited until yesterday, the day before election night,
right,
to publicly endorse Trump. And I wonder if he did that because, not that he was on the fence. I think he was always probably leaning that way.
Right.
But I think he did that because he did not want to, to endorse him this late in the game means that his endorsement would reduce the impact. Like, it's not, nobody that's gonna go and vote tonight, I hope, is gonna be like, oh, you know what? Rogan said it yesterday. I know exactly what I'm doing now. I hope that's not the case. and maybe that's why they waited. I'm sorry, maybe that's why Rogan waited. He wanted to make sure that whatever he decided on, it wasn't going to influence people in a manner that they don't feel comfortable with. Like I don't think he wanted to give any weight to anyone else's decisions. But if that be the case, he also could have just said, I'm not going to endorse anyone. I'm still going to vote, but I'm not going to publicly endorse anything. He could have done that, but he didn't. He wanted to be abundantly clear that he was endorsing Trump. As to why, and again, at the last minute, that's important to me as to understanding the meaning of that. Why do it at the last minute? Joe didn't make that decision just because Musk was right there all of a sudden. No, he's always been thinking it.
That's possible, though. That's possible that he decided to do that right there because of that. Or I don't know that it's true, but or it's possible that he did it, you know, as a financial recognition to capitalize on the cultural capital of the bro culture that follows him. Not necessarily to get them to go vote for Trump, but to finally come out, and he probably got a wave of advertisement surges or something when it
This
happens.
dude, he already has $200 million. This brother doesn't need to do anything.
And the more you get up into that era and that level, you still small fry. The more money you make, the more addicted you become to make. Don't think ever that somebody like Joe, who has $200 million contract, feels like they're secure. Man, now that money, all of a sudden, you get all kinds of stuff. You buy all kinds of stuff. You in a whole.
Now I need 300 million. Well, I mean, not, and that's if we believe most people are as avarice as the average American, meaning I need to have it all. I don't know if everyone's like that. I know. I mean, I don't think. Well, I mean, I like nice things.
No,
I'd like to always have more.
Cultural phenomenon. It's a cultural phenomenon. It's a particularly capitalist bourgeois development during and after the Industrial Revolution that Thorstein Veblen called conspicuous consumption, right? Where you develop this desire, you fetishize commodities, and you give money almost mythical qualities, and you just lust for it. Not everybody. You can resist this. In fact, people have been talking about that resistance for a very long time. You could argue that all aestheticism in various religions have these. The Sufis of Islam, or the Buddhists, or the monks of Christianity, who deprive themselves and remove themselves in isolation, going without. The famous, Buddha mentioned reaching nirvana by suffering, right? By leaving all these riches behind. So all of these are good examples of how one can resist. How many people do, how often. I think it becomes harder to resist when limbic capitalism begins to take over. And
there's that famous quote, it's hard to be faithful in a room full of hoes.
Sure.
And if America is a capitalistic version of that, then yeah, I guess it would be difficult for Joe, who already has over 200 million from that one.
It doesn't have to be conscious. It could be this subconscious drive to appease the supporters that you have by coming out and making a statement that they all agree with. So now you just kind of like gained more capital, right? And I wonder to what extent, I don't know, like, wish I knew more about Rogan's capacity. Sometimes, like, I'm over there watching some of these things, like in the Elon one, he's sitting there talking to Elon, and they're talking about global warming and how agriculture has nothing to do with global warming. It's all bullshit. It's complete bullshit. It's all bullshit. And then he like looks up something on the computer, and he's like, look at this. And he gives all these percentages, right? And I'm like, Rogan seems like the kind of guy who thinks he can just look something up real quick, and now all of a sudden that qualifies for you to be as certain as somebody with a PhD in climate science, who's been studying all of this stuff so much, the ins and outs. Wing it, Google, maybe even have probably AI over there telling you the answers for all we know. You know what I mean? feel good that does. In some cases, I mean, I don't know to what extent is this kind of a problem here. Like we were talking earlier about how people voting and the people deciding, and to what extent is having someone who's maybe not credentialed a scholar to be such an important person of knowledge for all these people believing him when he's making these statements based off his little Google searches that he's doing right in the middle of the interview.
But before Rogan, who were the American people listening to?
Those
They weren't. I mean, they didn't have the internet. Most. I mean, we're thinking about this pro podcast era. I'm sorry, this pre podcast era. Why do we even have podcasts in the first place? It's because there was this disconnect. It appears that there's this disconnect between news outlets in general. Readership went down. No one's buying magazines per se, and if they do, they subscribe to something on their tablet. But the physical paper is gone. The newspaper we used to deliver, gone. Columnists that we used to revere, gone. At least in that, books in that regard are diminished. Many people are not even reading anymore. They skim. And by the way, some people say, "Well, I read an article." Did you, or did you just skim it real quick?
Or did you? That'll read it for you. And
AI will summarize it for you. Exactly. So, like, here we have now the American people. They look at news stations. It used to be Walter Cronkite. Whatever that brother said was supposed to be golden in the in the 60s and the 70s. Golden. Then you get news cable network shows where I have this so-called analyst telling me this analyst telling you that. Then we find out many of these analysts are not allowed to deviate from whatever their producer is telling them what they need to do. Because remember, this is a show, and the show has ratings, and ratings are not based on boring people with information, but by being inflammatory with information, with their information. I feel like the American people and electorate, they pulled away from that. And then now people are getting their information, unfortunately, from guys who have no credentials in climate science, but he can Google his buddy. I forget his name, Jeremy, or the guy who Googles stuff for him.
Rogan.
Yeah,
I don't see they're doing it too. Or maybe that dude's doing it and then sending it to him.
Yeah, no, he's in the room. It's just Rogan and then that dude who Googles stuff.
Right.
that's I mean, that's his job. I mean, and he puts things on the screen for his guests to talk about. But why do we have so many people looking to these individuals? You said, well, why don't they go and listen to an individual that's more versed in the field? Why don't they?
Well, I didn't say that, but I did say, why is it that we rely on these guys?
Because we can't rely on the other ones. If I had an amazing, studio, I wouldn't have my iPad on a bar stool right now talking to you. You know what I'm saying? If I had something nice, I would be using something nice. If we had someone to believe in, we'd believe in him. We don't. The American people look at CNN, they look at Fox News, and they see how crazy polarizing it can be. And Fox News is actually kind of in the middle, which is why their ratings are so low. CNN. CNN has some of the lowest ratings because they're least inflammatory. It's Fox number one, MSNBC, and then everyone else. People love drama. You know what I'm saying? People love the flair of somebody like Rogan. And Rogan presents himself like, hey, I'm just an average Joe. I shoot the shit. I like to hunt. I like to eat jerky. I make elk on my Traeger, and people love him.
Yeah.
And why? What occurred for that transition from the media to this guy's basement?
He himself is, as well as Trump is, are media personalities. I mean, these guys are talk show hosts before they're anything, right? They're over here talking in front of people. And what do they do on those talk shows? Highly dramatized stuff. You're fired, blah, blah, blah. Or you're going to eat that cockroach. Like, come on, Gary
Oh
Vee
yeah, yeah.
background. Like, come on, man. Like, ain't nothing
Fear
changed.
factor.
No,
Yeah,
ain't nothing.
yeah.
People. They still the same showmen. I feel like, but the, um, Rogan has this showmanship about him that makes him seem smart, smart slash cool. He's got the tattoos. He's got the karate skills, and he can talk and say fuck and bullshit zone, and nobody
Yep.
telling him to. He's
Mhm.
got charisma about him. That's the problem, though. People believe this stuff. All of those things that I just described right there are not qualities one should be seeking out in order to soak in information. I go
Mhm.
back to when, week 2 or 3 in this Timberview class. I'm teaching these high school kids. I'm up here talking about something that I like. I'm getting all excited, and afterwards they're like, "Whoa, that was great! I love the way that you talk to us." And I'm like, okay, but you can love that all you want, but are you listening?
Mhm.
Are you paying attention? And what are you doing with the information that I'm giving you? Is it just stimulating you right now and you like that and now you're done, you're looking for the next stimulation, or are you going to go do the
Right.
hard work to unpack what I said, break it down, read up about it, study it, memorize it, focus on it, translate it into what you can say yourself, and put it to paper? That's where all the big stuff matters. I'm glad that you like to sit here and listen, but that's not what I'm here for. Now somebody like Trump or Rogan, that's what they're here for. They want you. All they care about is that stimulation. You think Rogan and them are expecting their listeners to sit down with a pad and pen and take notes? Man, the average cat
Mhm.
who listens to his show can't probably tell you what the conversation was 3 podcasts before the last one. They
Mhm.
don't. They're not learning this information. They're just doing it for, like, you're listening to a song. Maybe I don't know if that's a good enough analogy. Maybe watching a movie, watching a show. It's a different kind of thing. Like,
Well, I'll say what he does do is he has guests that are not typical. So sometimes he might have a politician, sometimes he might have an ecologist, sometimes he might have an astrophysicist, sometimes he has a comedian, sometimes he has a musician, and they just have long form conversations. I think another difficult thing for many Americans is, um, oddly enough, um, they can't listen to people debate. They might not even be able to listen to the conversation that you and I are having for an hour without needing some type of, dopamine hit of something that's going to benefit their attention. These podcasts are 3 hours long. To sit for 3 hours, what it does do, it informs you about some topic that Joe finds interesting, and then if you're inclined, you can go and research. If you're inclined,
yeah,
I'd
but
imagine.
that's the problem. Most people aren't. Now, yeah, here's the thing. I like the 3 hour deal. I like that. I don't have a problem with that. I like all of these types of things. But here's the biggest issue. Um, Sometimes he has great people,
Mhm.
uh, or who are maybe genuine in their intentions, and other times he has very bad people who aren't very uh, intentional, uh,
Mhm.
don't have good intentions, and he doesn't seem to be able to decipher the difference.
Mhm.
I'll give you an example. When I was looking up Solo's work again, he had some guy on his podcast talking about that book that we discussed last week, uh, Black Rednecks and White Liberals. And he hears the argument, he goes, "Whoa, that just blew my mind!" Like, it's almost like that's what they're looking for, this blow my mind moment. That you got somebody telling you something that goes against the grain, that you hear about it and it's like attractive to you. And it's interesting because I was listening to NPR News yesterday, and they were saying they had these psychologists on there who were doing research about infants, showing infants things that visually don't add up, like hiding something that they already know should be there, but they don't. It gives them this element of surprise that makes them focus on it, and then they'll remember that more. because they extended this research to other older people and came to this conclusion that people have a tendency to like remember something when it's like surprising, or when it draws action that they're
Okay.
not familiar with, right?
Mhm.
And I kind of sympathize with that, because one of the things that made education intoxicating for me was this element of, wow, I never thought of it that way, or oh, I didn't know that I could be talking about this, or I didn't know a teacher could do that. I didn't know what a professor was. I didn't know what a college class was. And it was just so uniquely different than what I was used to, that it very much attracted me to it, right? So I wonder to what extent, you know, Rogan is really just giving these little dopamine surprises, and
Mhm.
his show is really about the whoa, blow my mind moment. And in fact, I'll go so far as to say that it's not coincidental. I don't think. Look at the image. What is the image that he has of his logo?
His
It's
head spinning.
exactly when he says, "Whoa, that just blew my mind." You know what I mean? Like, and his eye and his like his
Yeah,
head just exploded. Like
and
you're
it,
looking at something for the first time.
but I think it's like like a mind trip, which is probably why he calls it the Joe Rogan Experience after the Jimi Hendrix
Yeah,
Experience.
yeah.
And you're making it sound like it's Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
It's
Uh,
closer to that, I would say, than it is Jimmy. You know, Jimmy's
you know,
gene can't be
one thing
put.
I was so if we so we have a lot of people, I guess, looking towards that platform to be informed. But I'm looking at a lot of these political ads, um, and I was thinking, y'all, I'm just trying to watch the game, and every other ad is a political ad. Now, I was thinking to myself, like, wait a minute, when in the Supreme Court case, I think it's Citizens United, where they ultimately declare that corporations are people and money is free speech. So now we see spending all over the place when it comes to elections. Um, when I saw an ad for a Ford F-750 dually, and it was going off a cliff or something, and it said at the bottom, "Do not try this with the Ford F-750 or whatever." And so it had to tell you, you're not this is not factual.
Right.
We cannot sell you something that's not, it's false advertising. But
Yeah.
when I look at these political ads, I'm like, whoa, how is it that they're both not saying false advertised type stuff? Like
Yeah.
they're both like, you're saying this, and that can't be true if this person's saying that. That can't be true if that person is saying this. But there's no boundary. There's no I don't want to say censorship, but there's no regulatory apparatus in place to say, no, you can't air that political ad campaign because it says this and it says that, and that's not true. Like there's no fact checking there. And I wonder why that's the case when you have to do that in order to sell soap. You got to do that in order to sell Kentucky Fried Chicken. You don't got to do that to sell an election.
Yeah, that's a good question. Because
It's mind boggling.
yeah, and it's really disgusting. It turns me off, and I'd say this, like, when you've taken, I forget which one is the blue pill or the red pill these days. I forget what they say in the Matrix. But once you've taken that pill and you've seen the light, and you've dedicated your life to knowledge and the pursuit of knowledge, um, you I should warn you, um, these types of things become ever more annoying, because you can smell bullshit very.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
When you're dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge, it irks me more and more when I see your intentions not being knowledge. And this is why I dislike politics so much, and partly why I think I've become on this journey towards anarchism. I mean, I'm never really any ism, but I'm always something a little different at every different times. But I think that's why it's more appealing to me lately, is because of the just uh, the whole culture of trying to like pull one over on me that's so blatant on both sides. And I mean, like, for example, this example here about Liz Cheney, like people talking about how he's like calling for the execution of Liz Cheney because he was talking about guns. But I mean, that's clearly an example of a misrepresentation, right?
For
Um,
sure.
where he's
Because
over
the
here,
full context was about
yeah,
being at
like,
war.
right, and she is criticizing it, but is benefiting from this
Right.
thing criticizing, which is what his point was, and we can debate that point all we want. I'd be more than happy to debate that point, but to try to like misrepresent it as saying he's like calling for the execution of his political
For
opponent,
sure.
you know, these
People play it up. They try to play victim, like the same thing that they were saying when Biden said, "All these people are garbage."
yeah, come on,
And
like
like,
that's what you think he meant,
and
like
so
come on,
now that
no.
right there is going to make you change everything.
Right. See, no, this is what we call building up straw men. This is why you need to take logic and you need to get a basic philosophy degree. But the best degree I got in my life, straight up, if I'm real, is my bachelor's degree in philosophy. I got a PhD in history. I got a master's degree in history. I got a bachelor's degree in history. Out of all those things, the one that armed me and equipped me the most to be successful and everything else I've done was the philosophy bachelor's degree. Um, and you can see straw men fallacies, ad hominem arguments,
Mhm.
or these different logical fallacies that you can see when you study how to argue, and you can so clearly see these people, and it's just so just
The disgust in your voice is like, ah, these people. It reminds me of that comedian. Oh God, George Carlin. Like at the end of his career, um, I think he even has a special, or it's like you disgusting people or you vile people. Like it, he has contempt for
yeah,
society, and
yeah,
he definitely has contempt for almost all politicians
yeah.
because he places them in the same barrel of politicians, pimps, and preachers. Um, they make their living based off your hopes, dreams, and fears. But yeah, he had a complete. At the end of his life, he was way more disgusted with where society was going than anything. You're right there.
I think I'm headed in that direction. You know,
You got to drop a special.
well, I mean, the beauty of our jobs, I think, or at least from my perspective, as an academic, is how much things change. I was talking to an old student today, Sincere. Remember him? He moved to Jersey.
Mm-hmm,
Uh,
mm-hmm.
called me today. We talked for about 30 minutes on his lunch break. Um, and uh, there's this kind of, I don't know, lost my train of thought.
Well, I was talking about people being disgusted with the current state of things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Why did I mention him? Because I think he was talking about, oh, yeah, we were talking about this idea of who are you going to vote for? How do you think the election is going to be? Um, and I think I was talking to him about like one of the reasons why third party voting appeals to me, not necessarily because you support the third party candidate, uh, but so that you can create a block maybe that
Mhm.
has capacity to pull and tug at this two sides of the
Right.
same damn coin thing that we're in right now.
That's the
Um,
whole purpose of third parties.
yeah, I mean, I understand that. Um,
They know they can't win in this system. So
right.
what they do is in essence, they hold hostage a small percentage of the vote that each candidate needs, and they say, "Hey, you better start listening to me, otherwise, we're doing this." And then that compels one of the two candidates to say, "Okay, all right. We'll listen. We'll listen." They did it. Sanders did it to Biden.
Hmm.
Um,
But he caved in,
yeah,
right?
but he caved in with the notion that that Biden would do the following, and he tried with the whole like exempt you from college debt, that type of stuff.
But if you read Cornell West's little excerpt or essay that he wrote on his campaign page, I think he
Hmm.
kept pretty strongly about how I'm not doing this here in order to compel one side. I'm doing this to try to topple a system entirely. So I'm
Hmm.
not wavering at all in trying to the purpose isn't to get the Democrats or get the Republicans to give you certain demands. I mean, the purpose is to dismantle a system that's based off greed, manipulation, power, and just lies, man. Constant.
And this is true, but however, maybe his fault is that had he been a student of history, he'd know that this is not the route to go. Then, sure, you can do this. If he's sincere about dismantling the system, that's not the route to go.
What isn't?
Running as a third party candidate.
Why not?
You can't win because how else will you disrupt it?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like if you start a slow revolution where you just keep getting more and more people swaying to your side, and to the point in which we get to a point where this two-party system is not going to have a majority.
That's fair. And if that's the case, then he won't see the fruit of his efforts.
Right.
And that it's akin to dream.
I think maybe have to have this mindset that you're putting something in place that which you will not even be able to experience or reap the benefits of. Right. I think Huey felt that as well, which is why his most powerful book is called what? Revolutionary
Suicide. Yeah. Dr. King said it when he said, "I've been to the mountaintop.
Right.
I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but it's there." Yeah. That's not the direct quote. No, that's not my final quote either. But
yeah. But I mean, I think that's where I'm at now with this whole just unable to pick the lesser of two evils. People hear how those abolitionists were saying, slavery is a necessary evil. I mean, there is no evil that is necessary. We like to think that it is to justify our actions, not be introspective, and just keep feeding ourselves through the system.
That's a solid statement. There is no necessary evil.
Yeah.
And that's an abolitionist? Or that's just like a...
This would say this in response to the 76er Jeffersonian generation that justified slavery as a necessary evil. And in fact, the pressure became so powerful that it forced Southerners to transform their justification of slavery. That's why they moved beyond arguing slavery was a necessary evil and start calling it a positive good, right? This is where paternity comes in, and the idea that slavery is a good thing, because there were so much legitimate arguments based off. I mean, they were hit by so many arguments that they couldn't defend by calling it a necessary evil that they had to switch gears. Yeah. Yeah, man.
We just leave it at.
Yeah, we can leave it at that. I think I got a Native American proverb that keeps staring at me from my list here. That's been here for a while. It says, "Listen, or your tongue will keep you deaf." Kind of fits, I think, with a lot of what we've been talking about here about charisma, and listening to people, or not listening to people, but hearing them, and maybe not trying to reflect by speaking so much. I think that is a quote maybe that may fit with Donald Trump. Listen, that's good. Listen, or your tongue will keep you deaf is a good term, Donald. And I think maybe for the other side, a quote from Bob Marley, where he says, "Don't gain the world and lose your soul. Wisdom is better than silver and gold." And I think both of those quotes fit me really well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think those are going to be the quotes that, that will fit this election. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And probably you at the moment, for sure. So I guess
All
we'll
right.
just leave it at that, man.
Yeah. We'll see how it goes. Be
All
easy.
right. All right. Holler at you.